Hello there, welcome to Africa News, bringing you the top stories on the continent, the headlines. More violence as Nigeria struggles with insurgency. Authorities say at least 120 people have been killed and close to 300 injured in a bomb and gun attack on a mosque. We cross live to Kano for the latest. The French president becomes the first Western leader to visit an Ebola-hit country. The Guinean capital was President Hollande's final stop before heading to the 15th summit of French-speaking countries in Dakar. And no third term for President Gnassingbé in the Togolese capital. Civil society groups take to the streets demanding reforms ahead of presidential elections in 2015. But first to our top story. Nigerian authorities say at least 120 people have been killed and nearly 300 injured in a bomb and gun attack on a mosque in Kano. Two explosions detonated inside the Grand Mosque. A third device reportedly went off nearby. Attackers also opened fire on worshippers. The mosque is where the Emir of Kano, one of Nigeria's most influential Islamic leaders, holds prayers. Last week he urged northerners to take up arms against the Islamist group Boko Haram. Our correspondent Aminu Abubakar is in Kano. We can cross live to him. Aminu, good evening to you. What's the latest development on Friday's attack?
The latest is hundreds of residents have thronged the morgue, and two hospitals are taking turns to identify their loved ones and then take them for burial, while restive youth have taken over the entrance of at least one of the hospitals, demanding to search anyone getting in, to avoid another bomb attack.
Now, Aminu, as relatives, as you say, they're desperately trying to make sense of what's gone on today. Can we see this attack as a reprisal for this call to arms against Boko Haram?
Yeah, nobody's in doubt that this attack is in response to the Emir's call to arms, asking people to rise up against Boko Haram to defend themselves. And obviously, this is a response to that.
Okay, Aminu Abubakar speaking to us from Kano. Thank you for keeping us up to date. The French President François Hollande arrived in Guinea on Friday, becoming the first Western leader to visit an Ebola-hit country. At least 1,200 people have died from the epidemic in the West African nation, where doctors had struggled to contain the spread. The World Health Organization now says the outbreak in Guinea is stable. France pledged €100 million to fight the virus, opening a number of treatment centres. Well, in Conakry earlier, Hollande spoke of solidarity with the West African nation.
In coming here, I wanted to transmit certain messages. First, a message of solidarity towards Guinea, and that goes for the Guinean people, those who are at risk of contaminating the disease, those who are worried about the disease, and those who are fighting the disease themselves. I also wanted to show our solidarity with the healthcare staff, who are doing an admirable job. They come from Guinea, France, and many other countries, and they take great risks to provide the Guinean people with the kind of care they need.
Well, President Hollande's next stop is the Senegalese capital for the 15th summit of French-speaking countries, or the Francophonie summit. France 24's Mark Perlman is in Dakar. We can cross live to him. Mark, good evening to you. Now, at the summit, we're expecting talk on Ebola, of course, but democracy and constitutional change are also likely to be high on the agenda.
Yes, absolutely. This was not planned. Initially, the focus was supposed to be on youth, on women empowerment, and of course on the promotion of the French language. However, clearly the recent events in Burkina Faso, where the longtime president Blaise Compaoré was ousted by protest against his willingness to remain in power, have changed the agenda. And clearly the issue of democracy, of constitutional changes in order to remain in power, will be front and center. winter, the French president will deliver the message that no, it's enough. Now you cannot change, twist the constitution for your personal benefit. And several of the heads of state who will be there to attend this 15th summit of French-speaking countries have indicated or actually tried to change the constitution. So clearly this is going to be a major issue of debate, because it's not anymore about being elected, but it's accepting to leave power that's now high on the agenda.
Now, Marco, away from some of the issues that are going to be speaking about there, the main objective of a Francophonie summit, for those who are unfamiliar, is it just promoting the French language?
Well, no, that's officially not the only agenda anymore. It's not supposed to be a defensive agenda, but a more ambitious one. First of all, on a practical term, the 35 heads of state and government will have to choose a new secretary general for the organization, and they will have to reach a consensus. But they want to make sure it's not only a cultural tool, but also a diplomatic tool, which can help solve some of the crisis we've seen. We know the organization was, for example, involved in the Burkina Faso crisis I mentioned earlier, but they also wanted to promote French as a business tool. Obviously, English is way ahead, and so they're hoping to make Francophonie, as they call it, also more of an economic advantage that many countries should seize, especially here in Africa, on the continent, where the majority of people who speak French are now located, and more because of the demographic growth. So this is the ambitious agenda. Obviously, it's not easy to make sure that you have an organization that's supposed to defend the French language, have a more ambitious agenda, but that's what they're hoping to achieve in the final declaration that will be decided by the heads of states and government tomorrow and on Sunday.
Okay, Mark Perlman reporting from Dakar. Thank you. Well, staying with the Francophonie Summit in Cameroon, an experimental educational programme called Elan Africa is being gradually rolled out across the country. The initiative aims to introduce children to bilingual learning as early as primary school, the idea being to formally teach an African language as well as French. Well, France 24's Coraline Molinet and Marley Sarr report.
In this schoolyard, children play and speak together in the Ewondo language. In Cameroon, classes are usually taught in French and English, the country's official languages. But for 2 years, Michel Atongana has been using native languages as part of the Elan Africa experiment.
When a child leaves home and begins school, he speaks his mother tongue. Then all of a sudden you introduce a new language to him. I think the child must first adapt to school in his own language, and only then, once he is well adjusted, we switch to French. It's easier that way, and pupils get better results.
Tested in over 3,000 classrooms, primary education in local languages is showing positive results. Success rates have been higher than average, enough to reassure parents who may have been a bit hesitant at first.
We were worried that the children would get used to speaking Ewondo alone and forget French. But now they understand both French and Ewondo, so that's very valuable.
Promoting mother tongues in order to improve the use of the French language, the new teaching approach is now hailed by the Organization of French-speaking Countries, known as La Francophonie.
National languages are not here to eradicate official ones or foreign ones from the education system. No, the purpose is to reinforce all these languages and help them coexist in the best way.
By 2050, over 90% of French speakers under 30 could be African. Finding the right balance with local languages is therefore essential for the future of the French-speaking community worldwide.
Namibians have voted in Africa's first electronic polls, which are widely expected to extend the SWAPO party's 24-year rule. Instead of paper ballots, 4,000 voting machines were used for the presidential and parliamentary polls. This despite criticism from the opposition. Over 1.2 million people are eligible to vote. The Election Commission has promised results within 24 hours. And finally, in the Togolese capital, civil society groups took to the streets on Friday demanding reforms ahead of 2015 presidential elections. Lomé is experiencing a growing citizen movement inspired by recent events in Burkina Faso. The objective to ensure that incumbent President François Gnassingbé doesn't seek a third term. Emmanuel Soji reports.
On their new day of action, Togolese protesters demanded again an immediate change of the constitution. They seemed more determined than ever.
Like President Obama said, African presidents shouldn't get more than 2 mandates. Togo's president should step down.
But President Gnassingbé's supporters say they would only examine a change of the constitution if the Togolese leader is allowed to run for a third term.
The president's partisans aren't against reforms. We're against those who try to use reforms for political maneuvers. Most Togolese citizens believe the head of state has done a good job over the past few years, and they want to give him a chance to run for a new term, if he's interested.
With our broomsticks, we will sweep away this altered constitution.
The broomstick has turned into a symbol for Togolese protesters, as it used to be in neighboring Burkina Faso, where President Compaoré was forced to step down. The opposition hopes to get 500,000 people to sign its petition against the current constitution, which allows the president to run for office as many times as he would like.
Well, your Africa team is back in 45 minutes' time. Up next, more international headlines.